Karen, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you guys.
Thank you. Just doing a quick test.
Okay, there's a little bit of a echo.
Thank you. We'll look into that. Hey, Clary. Can you hear us?
I can still hear you, just, it still kind of has that echo. Am I echoing when I talk to you guys?
No. Is this?
Still an echo.
Thank you. Sorry, Karen. One more time.
It's a little bit better.
Thank you.
I'll grab this stool real quick. There's a small. All right, well, pardon my voice, it's a little raspy. But welcome to the Town of Frisco public meeting. Here we are gonna sort of address our water source and the issues that we've encountered the past few years with it having a presence of PFAS detected in it, and present to you the proposals of moving forward with the advanced treatment. And what that looks like, what the costs will be, and teamed up with our engineers, with Plumber Incorporated, Taylor Gertig, and with the town engineer and director, Chris McGinnis. And we also are joined with some Plumber and Associates, Karen Croson, the environmental specialist. Hopefully, this public meeting, this format, we can better educate everybody on the challenges we've faced with and how we've navigated to work through them and what our solutions are to deal with them. So without further ado, Taylor.
Yep, so today, kind of like Ryan mentioned, we'll cover what is PFAS. We'll also cover the Frisco's water system, and then talk about the history of PFAS and Frisco. Then we'll get into our proposed project. And then we'll have a Q&A session at the end, so please hold any questions to the end, but we'll have an open dialogue at that time. And then just a reminder, if you didn't sign in on your way in, if you could please sign in for our documentation, we'd appreciate that. So we'll start with some background information on PFAS. So I'm sure we've all heard the word before, it's a buzzword right now, but it stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. These are also dubbed forever chemicals. So these are man-made chemicals, not naturally occurring. They're comprised of carbon and fluorine backbone, which that little graphic on the bottom shows. So these can be varying lengths of compounds. There's thousands of them, but they have a hydrophobic head, which makes them repel water. And so these have historically been used in a wide variety of products for their water, heat, and stain resistant properties. So in this graphic on the right, I know it's kind of small, but you can see some examples of where PFAS is used. So it's used in things we come in contact with every day, like water resistant clothing, stain resistant furniture, Scotch guard, that type of stuff. It's also in nonstick cookware and nonstick food wrappers, as well as things we apply to the ground, like firefighting foams or pesticides, and then things we apply to ourselves. So personal care products, shampoos, conditioners, cosmetics, lotions, all of these things contain PFAS. Recent science has indicated that PFAS accumulates in the body over time. Like the environment, they cannot naturally be broken down. And so we accumulate these through inhalation, contact with skin, and ingestion. So recent scientific studies have shown that exposure to some PFAS in the environment may be linked to harmful health effects in humans and animals. So these can range from increased risks of certain cancers, reproductive effects, and then immunological effects, sorry. This graphic on the right shows how PFAS is just prevalent in our environment, or how it can get there in the first place. So there can be PFAS producing or using industries that then produce a waste stream. That waste stream goes to our wastewater treatment plants. However, wastewater is not really, treatment facilities are not really able to treat for PFAS yet, or they're progressing towards that. So historically, PFAS then is present in the discharge to rivers and streams, or to biosolids that are then land applied. So then crops take up the PFAS and then we ingest it that way. Like I mentioned, the effluent can be discharged to streams and rivers. So that's how we're getting it in our surface water bodies. Also, when firefighting foams or pesticides are applied to land, that can either wash into surface water bodies, or it can percolate down into groundwater. So you can see there's a multitude of ways that PFAS can get in our environment. And at this point, we have found that PFAS is prevalent in every step of the water cycle. So unfortunately, at this point, it's very difficult to know, where did these originate from? At this point, they're just persistent in our environment. So the EPA has been thinking about PFAS for some time. So in 2009 and 2016, 6 PFAS compounds were included on the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. So what this is EPA's initiative to understand how prevalent potential compounds of concern are. They found that, okay, these are pretty prevalent. So in 2019, they released an action plan, which essentially noted their intent to ultimately regulate these compounds. Regulations do take a long time to develop though. So in 2021, they actually broadened their unregulated contaminant monitoring to 29 PFAS compounds. That UCMR is currently happening right now. So municipalities are sampling for those 29 compounds currently. But in June 2022, this is a key date, the EPA issued a revised health advisory level. This is not a regulated level, but this was the EPA saying, we now know that these 4 PFAS compounds have an adverse effect on human health. Again, noting their intent to ultimately regulate these compounds. Then in 2023, they came out with their draft regulation for 6 PFAS compounds. That was available for open comment in May. And then in April 2024, the EPA finally regulated 6 PFAS compounds. That is significant because prior to this time, we just knew that they were an issue. But now since 2024, their timeline for implementation is actually 2029. But now these are federally enforceable limits. So municipalities have to treat their water to meet or be below these regulated levels. So what are those levels? So like I mentioned, there's 6 PFAS compounds. It's actually 5 individual compounds. And then that bottom one is a weighted average of 4 specific compounds. So the middle column is the maximum contaminant level. That is the level that municipalities are required to treat to. So if you have above any of these values, you must treat your water for PFAS under federal enforcement. And so that PPT means part per trillion or nanogram per liter. So those are the regulated levels for those compounds, but then they also sometimes establish a goal. That's in the left-hand column. So they're essentially saying, if you have 4 parts per trillion of PFOA, for example, you have to treat and you want a goal of treating to 0. Then this third column is the trigger level. So that's just if you have PFAS at those levels, you have to increase your monitoring. So for context, a part per trillion is 1 drop of ink in 20 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So we're talking about very, very small amounts of PFAS in water that we're looking for. So then Ryan will talk about PFAS, the history of PFAS in Frisco.
Yeah. Thanks, Taylor. So in early 2020, public water systems across the state of Colorado were asked to voluntarily participate in a PFAS monitoring sampling event. This was funded by the state. Ultimately to, like Taylor had mentioned earlier, there was a lot of attention being drawn to this in like 2016. More and more data sets from the science community were coming out, and it was becoming more and more prevalent. So the state wanted to really kind of cast a wide net and see who would volunteer to participate so they could get a gauge as to general public's exposure to this through drinking water. It was being found in more and more water sources nationwide. So they asked if we would participate, and we did. Just a quick background, Well 7 itself, for those of you who have lived here for a little while, it's a fairly new water system, or water source rather, that's been developed. It was developed and put online to our distribution system in 2018. We feel fortunate that this wasn't a long existing well that this had been present in, that we had no idea in for a long period of time. So we feel fortunate in that aspect that it was a smaller window of time. But with PFAS, it's new and it has been evolving, and it's really ramped up in these last few years with the science community, the funding, and the understanding. It's relatively expensive, so that's why the state kind of offered to kind of do this voluntary testing in 2020. And another hurdle or barrier was that the laboratory technology was pretty limited. So there were very few labs nationwide that could actually perform these water analysis. So it's definitely came a long way in the last few years. But our samples were taken in mid-April of 2020, and they came back relatively low. At that point in time in 2020, it's kind of, I guess, important to understand the timing and how the regulatory environment was changing. But in 2020, there was a health advisory that was based around PFOA and PFOS and the combined value. And if you exceeded 70 parts per trillion, then you had to issue a health advisory and have transparency and let the people being exposed to this be aware. And our values from our first round of testing, we were more than 3 times below that. We were at 17.6 combined, or 17.2 combined. So it was alarming for us to have found PFAS present, but there was not a lot of guidance from the health community, from the state, from a regulatory perspective. They really just had this singular health advisory that if you were exceeding 70 parts per trillion, and you qualified to make a health advisory. Just to give a quick, broad overview of the town water system, there's an aerial shot, and we have 4 water sources. The star on the lower left-hand side of the screen, that's our surface water treatment plant. It's located at the end of West Main Street, and it draws surface water. So that's the watershed that's housed up in the White River National Forest that kind of flows down, and it's a contributing stream to the 10 Mile Creek. We also have wells 5 and well 6. Those are the 2 side-by-side stars. Those are going to be located in, one's in Meadow Creek Park. The other is about 200 yards to the west of Meadow Creek Park. And then our 4th water source is going to be the yellow star, and that's well 7. Well 7 is currently the only water source that we have that does test beyond measurable and measurable amounts. So with Taylor mentioned earlier, it's such a very, very small quantity that the laboratory equipment can sometimes have influences, giving it a sort of a false positive if it's below a specific value. So on some testing, you might get 0.005 of a part per trillion, but they can't guarantee that that could be a repeatable result. So as the technology evolves, it's gotten better, and some of those margins of errors have been eliminated out. But to this day, well 7's our only water source that has those high values. And one other thing I guess worth noting to just again help explain, we've got surface water and 3 groundwater. The 2 groundwater, well 5 and well 6, those are in a separate alluvium, and so that's basically a kind of a fancy word for an underground flowing body of water on a glacial till. So that's in the Meadow Creek alluvium, and well 7 is actually in the Miners Creek alluvium, and they're divided by the 10 Mile range. So it's all kind of the same water, but it is very different in how it's separated. This chart right here is going to show you what our average of quantities that we were seeing. So we ran, when we first discovered that we had PFAS in it, the state was being very supportive in offering grant money for communities or entities that really wanted to kind of dive further in it. And so the town qualified and received a $50,000 grant from the state of Colorado. And that's when we engaged with Plummer. So we could start a piloting process. And piloting is basically a very small scale filtration system that you run, and you just continuously monitor and analyze the water, and you select targeted filter media to do the removal. So there's lots of different filter medias, but they are targeted towards specific types of compounds. So the town had chosen to pursue granular activated carbon, and then we decided to try 3 different proprietarily separate ion exchange resins. And those are very targeted towards the chemical compound structure of PFAS. Let's see. Yeah, so that's for the most part the average. We were sampling our piloting system ran about 16 months, and we were testing about once a month. And you know, what we're testing for obviously is the effectiveness of the filter media, but at what point is that chemical compound making breakthrough and actually passing through the filter media, so you can kind of create a better look at how effective that filter is going to target the compounds you are specifically looking to target. The next one. And this again, sorry, apologize for my voice. This is kind of a broad timeline as to how things have been progressing and happening for us. I did mention earlier that health advisory that existed in 2020, when we first got our results back, it did change and modify in 2022. June of 2022, and it went from 70 parts per trillion down to PFOS was adjusted to 0.02 parts per trillion, and PFOA was adjusted down to 0.004 parts per trillion. And at that point in time, the well was still functioning and operational. And so for water customers out there, you would have received a public notice stating that we were sort of over that threshold, because the EPA at that point in time, you know, kind of made the original health advisory modification to this new much more stringent modification. So just to kind of, you know, if you've received that notice in here and still have lingering questions about that, that's why that happened. And then April of 2024, the EPA finally set legally enforceable standards for maximum contaminant levels. And that previous slide outlines, you know, kind of what those are for those compounds, and that hazard index, which is the combination of those compounds together. And then kind of where we are today, the town, we've been working, we did our piloting scale for about, like I said, about 16 months. We've taken all that data and we provided it to the manufacturers who we sourced the different filter medias from, and they provided us with reports based on all of our raw water chemistry, all of the performance values from the piloting system, and gave us kind of a projection of, you know, this is how long, or this is, excuse me, this filter media, you know, will be able to filter out, you know, X amount of millions of gallons. It will, you know, be this cost annually. And so then we partnered up with Plummer before this, and we got to this stage. That's when we kind of looked at our options, because like I said, we chose granular activated carbon and ion exchange, similar but very different. And we sort of had to make a decision, and the town thought it was in the best interest to pursue granular activated carbon as our remedy or prescriptive measure.
And then just to add a couple notes on this slide. So, well 7 was turned off in 2022, has not been in service since then. And then also, that April 2024 date, that's when this became a regulatory issue. So the town has actually been extremely progressive in addressing this issue. Early on, they noted, we want to do something about this. So they are actually on the very early side of a project addressing this issue. So kind of as Ryan alluded to, so what do you do once you find PFAS in your water supply? So there are a few best available technologies. These technologies are not new, but we learned throughout the industry over time that these can also apply for PFAS. So these have been around a long time. So there's two types: adsorption technologies and then a physical barrier technology. So adsorption, the PFAS is adsorbed onto media. And so those are the granular activated carbon and anion exchange that Ryan mentioned. So that black stuff is granular activated carbon. That's like what's in your Brita filter. And then the anion exchange is up there. That's a magnified image. But if you've ever, I know you don't have hard water here, but if you've ever lived somewhere where you have hard water and you have to do like a softener system, you're using an anion exchange resin system. The other options is membrane, which is a physical separation of the PFAS from the water, and then you're left with a concentrated brine stream or waste stream. So we'll get a little bit more into the Frisco specific projects. So like Ryan mentioned, we began piloting GAC and anion exchange in February 2023. So this is what the pilot system setup looked like. They're columns of media where your raw water is flowing in, and then you're taking a sample of the effluent monthly. So during this time, a little bit of the well 7 water was used, but all of the water from the system was discharged to sewer. It was never sent into the distribution system. Both technologies remove PFAS compounds to non-detectable limits. So if you remember that drop of ink in a swimming pool, that's really impressive and really effective treatment. So once we learned that both of these technologies were going to be effective for the town of Frisco, we then looked at the operational maintenance costs and considerations, and then the capital costs of the full-scale system. Sometimes, one has a higher capital cost and one has a higher O&M. In the case of Frisco, given the design parameters for this project, they actually have very comparable life cycle costs, meaning the capital and the O&M will balance each other out over 20 years. So these two technologies are very comparable to one another. So then, since cost wasn't really a driving factor there, like Ryan said, we ultimately recommended that the town move forward with the GAC system design. And that's just because GAC offers a few benefits over ion exchange. So GAC, that media can actually be taken and by the media manufacturer and then regenerated for another beneficial use. So we kind of like that aspect of it. And then also GAC can remove other compounds while removing PFAS. And so that could be a potential benefit for the town, even though there's no other regulatory concerns that we have at well 7 currently. So our proposed reduction system, like I said, is a GAC system. So the GAC is housed in closed vessels. I have a picture later of what that actually looks like. So there will be 2 closed vessels and they'll operate in a lead lag configuration. And so this graphic here is a schematic of that. So the inlet water with PFAS will go into the first vessel. The PFAS is adsorbed onto the media, and then it goes into the second vessel where it kind of gets another pass through the media, and then it comes out. And then, per our pilot, we're at below detectable limits of PFAS coming out of the vessel system. Once, say in this example, vessel 1, the GAC is all its absorption sites are occupied, or the PFAS has, absorbed as much as it can onto that bed. The media manufacturer will come and change out the media, and then vessel 2 will become the lead vessel and vessel 1 will become the lag vessel. So you're kind of always alternating your vessels, but you always have like a 2-pass system. I think I covered everything on that side. Again, the media is removed and regenerated by the carbon manufacturer. So these vessels are required to be housed in a building, obviously in Frisco, it gets cold here. And so our project is proposing a new treatment building adjacent or next to well 7. So to orient you to this map, well 7 is near the Nordic Center and the Peninsula Recreation Area. So you can see the Nordic Center and the rec path. Well 7 is kind of up on this driveway. You may have noticed it if you're cross-country skiing. What we're planning to do is put a new treatment building in that existing driveway up to well 7. And then we'll have to reroute the driveway or add a little driveway addition so that both buildings are accessible to by the town staff. The building will be about 32 feet wide by 47.5 feet long, so it's a little bit bigger than the existing building. But the building height will match the height of the buildings in the area, as well as like the aesthetics of the buildings in that area. So here's what the building will look like from the outside. So very similar to well 7 and similar to kind of the look of that area. And make sure not to make it super tall, but you can see in this cutaway here that the vessels themselves are quite tall. They're about 15 feet tall. And so the building will be kind of sunk into the ground a little bit. And again, that was just for, to kind of make the building mesh with what else is around there. So the project will consist of this new building, the treatment vessels, and then piping to convey the water to and from the well 7 building to the system. Karen will go over the environmental review for this project.
Hi, everyone. You can hear me?
Yes.
My name is Karen Crozen. I'm with Plummer. I work with Taylor, and I've had the pleasure of working with her on a couple different Town of Frisco projects. And I've put the Town of Frisco on my places I would maybe want to retire one day. I did the environmental review for this project. As you can see, there is very minimal impact. The proposed project is not likely to adversely affect any environmental resource, including waters of the U.S., threatened and endangered species. And we also had a cultural investigation done as well. Everything was cleared. We have no waters of the U.S. or wetlands within the proposed project area. No state or federally listed TNE species were observed, and we do not expect any adverse effect to any species or their habitat. The archaeologist and his report came back with no cultural resources were observed within the proposed area, or the APE, which is the area that they investigate. And then impacts from the construction of this project are all anticipated to be temporary. So as far as waters of the U.S., threatened and endangered species, cultural, we are clear to move forward and not have any adverse effects on any of those environmental resources.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
All right, I'll go through some of the proposed project cost. This is a significant project that we're proposing, so there's some large costs associated with it. I first want to highlight that a lot of these costs are approximate. We're not fully through design, so some of these are subject to change. But to give you an idea, the total project capital cost, so that's the initial upfront construction cost, are roughly $9 million for the treatment. Then the O&M cost, that's operations and maintenance. So that's everything that follows once we finish construction, and kind of the annual ongoing costs of that is approximately $110,000. And that has to do with the carbon media change out, disposal of that, personnel and staff costs with the maintenance of that building, of the media, of the treatment system. So on to the next question that a lot of you might be curious about is, how will this affect your water rates? You'll see we have pretty large range in here right now of 5 to 25%. And, that's a few factors. There's one that, even taking PFAS out of this, we're completing a rate study. We're looking at what rates will look like in the future for other large infrastructure projects, some of our aging infrastructure, different items with that. So, there's water rates don't go down over time. So, there's going to be an increase, kind of with or without this project. So there's a kind of a base increase. And then within that, on this project, we're still looking at funding sources, grant options. We're still looking at some things to try to reduce some cost on the design. So it's a bit of a moving target right now, but just to give you kind of a ballpark big range, is we're looking at anywhere from 5 to 25% increase on the water rate usage cost. So why is this project necessary? first thing is that we're all water, you could argue, is greatest asset the town of Frisco has. You know, it's kind of the basis of everything else that we need, and kind of the basic necessity for all residents and visitors here. You know, why specifically do we need to treat well 7? You know, the biggest thing comes down to redundancy, resiliency of our water system, and then also future proofing it. You know, so as we talked about earlier, there's 4 water sources right now. We have 3 wells, and then we have 1 surface water treatment plant. And what's good is that, one, we have a water portfolio that has some strong water rights that are very senior water rights. Within that, you know, each one, like our surface water plant on North 10 Mile Creek, that can be prone to having to be shut down due to low water flows in the summer. You know, it's prone to drought. If there's ever a large wildfire in that area, you know, that could cause ramifications of not being able to operate that plant for periods. And then well 5 and 6 are you know, located close together. They're basically in the same aquifer. And so there's not a lot of redundancy between those 2. And so right now, you know, we have well 7 shut down. There's no, you know, immediate need to get it on right now, but in the longer term, you know, outlook, it's, you know, well 7 is a large producer of water. It taps into another aquifer. It's a large aquifer that can produce a lot of water. So it can help give us that redundancy, that resiliency if there's drought, if there's wildfire. It can also help us, you know, future proof for future development, future growth, you know, by giving us more water into our system and increased capacity.
So then, you know, you might ask, well, where else is this being done? So GAC and anion exchange systems are specifically for PFAS treatment are already installed throughout the US. So mostly California, Arizona, Florida, Michigan. That's because states were being essentially requiring earlier regulations in the EPA. Colorado was not in that boat. So in Colorado, South Adams County actually just broke ground on construction for a very large GAC treatment system. Security Whitefield also has an anion exchange system for PFAS treatment. And then there's several other projects in design. And this is what the vessels look like. You can either fill that with carbon or anion exchange. That's an example in Tucson, Arizona. Those are some case studies there.
So project next steps, you know, first want to say that kind of this timeline here is kind of dependent upon funding determination, other projects, market conditions. So there's a few variables, but this is kind of what we're targeting for our schedule. But it is, you know, tentative and can be subject to change. But January 2025, the town will apply for state revolving funds for the state of Colorado. Spring 2025, that funding determination will be made, and we'll know a little more on cost I'm talking about and kind of the funding sources there. Summer 2025, you know, we're partway through design right now. We'll finish design, have it 100% design, and then we'll begin construction. And then we're looking at roughly a 2-year construction schedule. So beginning, you know, in 2025 and then completing, you know, towards the end of summer in 2027.
And maybe just to add to that, so the state revolving fund are long-term, low-interest loans, sometimes with grant opportunities, but that's not necessarily always guaranteed. So if you'd like to find some additional information there's some links, you're welcome to take a picture of that for EPA regulations, PFAS specifically in Colorado, CDPHE's state revolving funds, and then PFAS treatment in water and wastewater. So at this time, we'll take questions. If you can please state your name before you ask the question for our documentation, that'd be appreciated. And then we'll start with in-person questions and then go to the virtual folks.
Last name GETSCH, we're at 108 Creekside Drive, Unit 1. Not sure who to address, but you mentioned the water rights. How old are they? Under what stipulations? I've been with several water attorneys in the last probably 10 to 15 years, and they say, obviously, because the water laws are being rewritten, how are those water rights protected with the town and with the county?
Yeah, so we have a few water rights. Our oldest one is the Frisco Town Ditch Water Right. 1903. It's, you know, it's one of the oldest in the state. So that's our most senior water right. And then what was the second part of your question?
Those are first level rights, I'm assuming?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The second part is, so what happens to well 7? Does it ever come back or exist, or you level it and go with a new system?
So this treatment system will be in addition to the existing well 7.
But well
So-
7 will continue to operate
If
at a
this-
future date?
Yes,
Okay,
with the PFAS treatment.
okay.
Sorry, did that answer your question before we
Yes,
move
it
on?
did.
Okay, thank you.
A little bit more detail about, so at the present time, you got well 7 turned on, and our water needs are currently being met. How close to the edge are we? And has the option been explored of basically mothballing 7 and staying within the 3 systems? Perhaps extracting more from those systems and also controlling demand. The part of Frisco and so not permitting things that will increase the demand. Or also, can well 7 be used for consumption water, watering the fields that are right nearby, using to make snow right nearby, but not for consumption purposes?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so all of the points that you brought up are being currently analyzed as to what's going to be kind of the most cost effective. Obviously, if we have to pay $9 million out of our coffers, it's not a sustainable move on the town's behalf. Representing the constituents, because we do have other great sources of water. I think a big factor in this is if we qualify through the state revolving fund for emerging contaminants. They had a bolstered amount of money get designated through the bipartisan Infrastructure Act a few years back. So now that money is actually sort of leaving the controls of the state government being deployed. So if we qualify for a good amount of money, I believe, it really puts this project kind of in that doable space for us. But again, it's sort of analyzing and understanding how much money we qualify for from the state, and understanding how much of that we will be responsible for. To address, we do have room at our production facilities to meet the town's demands currently. Like Chris had mentioned earlier, the water treatment plant, that's only rated for 1 million gallons a day. So that does have an actual flow, like defining stop. And then that can be influenced also by drought and the weather conditions. And then wells 5 and 6, they're high producers, but they're somewhat aged. They've been drilled in the 1960s, and as the town is growing, we're supplying more and more water, and so we've seen our water production just steadily climb. We're trying to trim back and do leak detections and try to eliminate any water waste we can to be efficient with our resources. But just really trying to see where this project fits through that grant opportunity through the state of Colorado.
And just to add to that a little bit, early on when we looked at this, we looked at all the alternatives. We looked at what if we just abandon that and just use our existing systems? What if we drill a new well? What if we try to just have that mix into the system to get to, and we showed that all of those options weren't viable compared to this. So this was still the most viable option, because when it came to, if we just abandon it from the system, right now we're meeting the needs, but like we said, with future growth demands, with some of these scenarios, if we have a drought, here's some of those, there can be a time where not meeting demand in the future. So that kind of took that one off the table. When we're looking at, whether a well at another area, some of these as things develop, we're still looking at, are there alternatives? But right now that option wasn't very viable because, that whole aquifer area, you're probably going to have the same contaminants, and then we don't have a lot of great areas to build a new well. We showed that connecting to the system, that just, and then there's also the risk that if you have a new well, you might still have contaminants. This kind of guarantees that you're getting PFAS out, it also treats any other items. So it kind of guarantees that source, whereas these other ones, there's still kind of other risks and issues with that. So kind of the combination of those, and then I think your other question too, you asked about, can we use it for non-drinking water, whether it's snowmaking, some of those. And we did look at that as an option as well, but again, the amount that we use for snowmaking and those uses is still a fraction of what we would use it for the overall municipal system. So kind of the majority of that well is still not being used if we go that route. And then the drinking water system is still kind of, a little short on capacity if we do that. So, it's a good question. We kind of looked at a lot of these alternatives. We're still analyzing as we finalize design and it comes out on kind of this emerging issue. But, right now we're showing that treating it at well 7 is the most likely.
Lynn Watkins, is it possible for future development, approvals of future developments and such to require a contribution for the building of this facility, even in retrospect, even if you start construction, you've built it, whatever, can there be a stipulation to developers that they need to pay a certain amount based on unit?
Yeah, basically with, I mentioned we're going to be doing a water rate study this year, and then this is going to be kind of a component we're looking at with that water rate study. We look at both, what should the rates be for people already connected into the system and paying, and then what are our tap fees for new development, people connecting in. So with that, we'll be analyzing that. We're going to be looking, not just at this project, but other projects that we have to do over the next 5-10 years. And with that, we'll be looking at what makes sense for, the new people tying in versus current rates. So, yeah.
And one other thing, if you were to use the well 7 water for other uses rather than drinking water, you wouldn't be getting rid of the PFAS. It would be spread out in the environment or
That's a great,
whatever.
yeah. If you use
So
it
you're not
on the tubing hill, then
right,
you have PFAS in your stove.
right. Yeah.
Marilyn Getch. So, we all shouldn't be guaranteed a bunch of money in our savings accounts or whatever, but we are wanting clean water to drink and clean air to breathe. Those are kind of priorities. So who was affected by 7? What parts of maybe you went over that before we got in, but what parts of Frisco are affected by 7?
So you want to go back? How?
Sorry.
No, all good. That's a great question. So the town of Frisco's water distribution systems, the water is treated at each of the facilities and is pumped directly into the distribution system.
Okay.
Just like the circulatory system of a body, it goes where the lowest pressure is. Meaning, if you cut your hand off, it all kind of finds its way out. So wherever the water is being used the most is where that dynamic movement in the system is occurring. And so it depends very much so seasonally. We take the water treatment plant offline in the spring during runoff. Water quality in the creek is very, very turbid, cloudy, inferior water. But also for us in that same time frame, water demand is relatively at its lowest. People aren't irrigating. Usually town's kind of quiet. So we have the virtue of being able to turn that off and to let that kind of inferior water go by. And we can rely on well 5 and well 6. So back to your question, who did well 7 affect?
Yes.
It swirled, as water moves out of the system, water is kind of following behind it. There is a water storage tank out at the peninsula buried in the hillside. So when well 7 runs, typically it's kind of filling up that water tank, that water reservoir. But there is also mixing that's occurring from water that's already in the system, in the pipes in our distribution system. So when this was all occurring at the very beginning, we were sampling all throughout town to try to see and capture where this water is traveling and how far out are those values not diluted down enough. But for the most part, geographically, it was more isolated to that portion of town where it's located.
Which is like what little area,
So
like
it's
near
a-
downtown or?
No, so I guess, the downtown corridor is gonna be located right there.
Oh, okay.
You know, we're located here approximately. So this is out at the peninsula area. Right here is the county commons.
Okay,
And this is the recreation area. And this is Highway 9 traveling southbound.
okay. So this water, just a couple questions. So this water, after it's treated, is it tasting a lot different?
It would taste the same.
It tastes the same, okay. And then, so the increase of 5% or 25% up on water bills, the potential, that's for everybody in the town of Frisco.
Yeah.
Everybody,
Yep.
okay. And then there's no issues with it being in the water if you're showering or bathing a grandchild in the tub. Is there a absorption into the body or?
There is dermal absorption. You can also inhale it if it's in the air or, consume it in your food or your water. So there are multiple pathways. Essentially the EPA's, this is a huge problem, not just for water, but for everything. But, where should we be addressing this first? Like you said, we all should have clean water to drink. So that's kind of the first step to managing this problem is let's get our drinking water clean. And then the regulations for other items may come. But yes, if you are bathing in PFAS containing water, then you would be accumulating PFAS.
Or a shower,
Yep.
breathing in,
Mhm.
so it's pretty critical. You just assume that you're gonna get good old water when you turn on the faucet and you just don't realize. And I know Whitefield has had a huge issue because of the fire department and the different chemicals that have over the years gone into their aquifers and all. So you don't know anything about that, the contaminants?
Security Wildfield does have a PFAS treatment system, so they did have PFAS in their water. I don't want to say where that may originate from, but there's, you could probably look online and see where that may be coming from. There are military operations nearby.
Okay,
Lynn Schutz, so for well 7, it sounds like that's coming off of Miners Creek, the water.
So it's actually drilled into the Miners Creek alluvium. So that alluvium is that kind of underground river.
Do we know if that, the PFAS that, what the source of that was? Is there any chance it had to do with the fire a few years back? I can't remember what peak it was, if it was 8 or no.
7.
No, when it was peak 2.
From the fire retardants that they drop on it.
Fire retardants.
To the best of my knowledge,
Was there any way to trace that, like where, no?
We don't know, the groundwater contamination one is, complex thing to be able to pinpoint. And then like we talked about, the PFAS, it doesn't break down in the environment. So it's there for decades. So it's, it's not like something happened and the next day your well is contaminated. So there's there's multiple theories that have been floated around, but there's no way to really know what the source of that was.
I think you said earlier, but when were PFAS actually discovered? I mean, not just here, but.
so it's been in industrial usage since the 60s.
Yeah, probably
Like-
the 50s, yeah.
Teflon coated pans,
Okay, right.
pizza
Okay.
boxes. It's any application where you need to have that separation from a liquid. Pizza boxes that had a layer of it just so they wouldn't kind of lose their structural integrity with something steaming inside of them.
So, and then just one last question. You mentioned that well 7, this treatment system, is just gonna be for well 7. It's possible that these other wells could be contaminated one way or another,
No, so we've been actively testing them.
but they could be contaminated. I mean, there could be I don't know if the wildfires are managed now with those same foams that they, spread and that they could.
Correct, yes, there could be an introduction of a contaminant to that, at either locate or all 3 other locations.
And I'll maybe create one bigger well that would filter all 4 wells.
So there are water systems, I'm sorry, that pump all their water to a and they transmit that water to a treatment facility, and it blends all of the waters and it treats it all there. And, here, we just don't have that infrastructure in place, because we would have to really put a lot of investment into transmission lines to take all of the water and then centrally pump it to one location to treat it. And that investment would be very large.
Just one last, seriously, last question. You mentioned there was $9 million to build this, and it sounded like, is there a plan if you don't get the eval money, how would we pay this, or is it just, it's not gonna happen?
So we will still, I guess we'll assess options, once we know exactly the funding. We have some money budgeted in our water fund. We're kind of looking, this water rate study, we're looking collectively at all of the kind of infrastructure projects. We're doing an assessment of our whole water system right now, looking at water lines. So we're gonna kind of have a bigger picture once this project's fully designed, once we have that, and then we would, determine whether that schedule gets delayed, whether we still go forward with the 2025 schedule. So, right now the plan is to mitigate well 7, just the exact details and timing of it are a little bit of a moving target right now.
Thank you.
So I brought paperwork so I can go over each thing.
Excuse me, who are you?
I'm sorry. My name is John Gray Ginsburg. I'm a homeowner in Mountainside. I'm a native of Frisco. I'm also a delegate for the Republican Party for Summit County, and I'm the state delegate for the Republican Party, and I'm in politics. But I'm a homeowner and a native. I live just down the street. And I brought some paperwork with me. For instance, I wish we would have shown the letter the town of Frisco gave on the water. So I brought the town of Frisco's letter sent October 2nd. And this letter says that the water violates federal law. The letter actually says it violates federal law. I want to say before I start, I'm for building these treatment plants, but you failed. I work for Halliburton. I'm in the computer business. They're one of my clients in the past. You failed to mention the energy costs. Water treatment is the most expensive industrial energy other than foundries for steel. In Saudi Arabia, they use nuclear. And nowhere in your budget to mitigate this federal complaint we have, because we have federal complaints on this. Okay, for instance, the news. This is CBS News. And it says that our water is 3 times the federal limit for heavy metals and PFAS.
PFAS.
Yeah, well, it's from the mine pits in the military mine, in the mine that we have in Leadville, which hasn't been brought up in this study, so I'd say that's a negative. Also, your study doesn't mention the energy costs at all, it doesn't even bring it up. So I would say based on current energy costs, it's going to be several times larger or even logarithmically larger. Also, the treatment you're recommending is only for the town of Frisco. We're a headwater for the country. So what we flush, the rest of the country gets. And I'm with several committees, political committees. I got to show you my plastic badge that are part of federal. Here's one of them. Here's a federal case that we're in about this. Here, it's for you. And it has to do with United Water, which is part of the special district right here by well 7. I'm part of the special district. My house is part of the special district that's part of well 7 called United Water and Sanitation. And I brought the paperwork right here. There. And anyways, so what I wish for you is that you have 100 times your budget. And putting the burden and the hardship on Frisco for a national water project is unreasonable, unconscionable. And as a politician, I say that what you're doing is just a false mitigation. I mean, you're doing a test survey, great. But we need millions of acre feet of water purified. We need 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We need multiple of these. Not one to just show we can do it. And the one to show we can do it is just political. It's just addressing the major problem we have. This water is contaminating the whole US on both sides. We're a headwater. And what another criticism is that this map is for Frisco, right? Mm-hmm. But not for Breckenridge and Keystone. And what it does is it's myopic. focuses on a little part of a larger problem and politically deals with it, Ms. Waters. I agree that we need to have water treatment. It's part of my campaign and my committee's campaign for years. And also you forgot to mention that we also got a letter from the town of Frisco in 2014 and 2017 that said, don't drink the water. The problem is the town of Frisco only circulates to certain homeowners like myself, like this letter. Not everyone was given this, nor did it make the newspaper, which is an obstruction of justice. That letter says that they buy, and on the other side of this, you'll notice, what did Frisco, oh, that's the special district is not in TurboTax that's providing this water. There's money laundering and racketeering going on behind the water delivery already with special districts called United Water. And the way the town of Frisco has dealt with this national emergency, unfortunately, I look at you, Ms. Waters, and I asked why our elections were canceled. I got a letter saying the water is contaminated, and then the response was to cancel our elections. And as a political science analysis, when a town at a headwater has contaminated water 3 times, I mentioned the CBS article, 3 times the federal level for contaminants. Excuse me, I wish I had some water. When an American town at a headwater, riparian headwater, where water goes both ways, makes CBS News for having contaminated water 3 times the federal level, but the town canceled elections. And this survey is mitigation, and it's an attempt to mitigate. But the truth is, this is a US headwater, and we need 20 treatment plants, not 1. And the energy consumption for this, because it's not part of your plan, I don't think your plan is acceptable at all. I would just toss it. Because energy consumption, and I'm going to quote, for instance, the Saudi Arabian nuclear plant that desalinates water. It's one of the biggest desalination plants in the world. And that is an example of the cost of cleaning water as one example. And it's used in the water industry. Because I'm part of United Water, who took over my land and my lake at Bills Ranch Lake, I'm in the water business and I'm in politics. So I would say you need to go back to your drawing board and give the people and my constituency, I'm going to speak on behalf of Mike and Ms. Waters' constituents, who cancel the elections, that your budget proposal really needs to address the federal issue we're having, because this gets, hold on, sir.
Hold on,
I'm putting some things out, and your budget proposal doesn't mention energy costs at all. You didn't have a slide.
So I'll speak to the energy cost really quick. Is a good question. So we didn't give a depiction of what the existing well 7 consists of, but it is a vertical turbine pump that is, the well is 165 feet deep. And so there's a 75 horsepower pump that then the water is disinfected and sent to distribution system. With our PFAS project, we would essentially use the same pump it through our media, and then disinfect it. So actually the existing pump can handle the increased pressure of the system. The system is about 10 PSI. So we can use the exact same pump that we have. Therefore, there's not an anticipated increase in energy costs. The only additional energy cost for this project is interior lighting of the new building.
Nina Waters. Actually, my question is actually not similar, but identical to Mr. I'm sorry.
Gray, your last name's Gray, like Gray's Beef, my mom's family, Ginsburg. Like
Mr. Gray Ginsburg's comment, but I am curious. I'm glad to know that the town of Frisco did volunteer to do a lot of this monitoring and testing prior to. I'm just curious, and you may not know this answer, is because I know that Miners Creek is an alluvial source of this water, but it also dumps into the Dillon Reservoir. I'm curious to know if Denver Water did any similar monitoring or analysis of their water, and just curious to know if they had any results that were similarly suited to what was found in Frisco.
I can speak to that. Denver Water did do voluntary testing as well, since they're such a big entity.
Yeah.
But they have such a diverse water portfolio that they have a lot more flexibility. I can't speak to exactly what they found in Dillon Reservoir, but overall, they are not over the regulatory limit, so they're not needing to pursue a PFAS project at this time.
Okay, so with my committees, we get the water reports from Denver, which I have. In fact, if I had 3 minutes, I could just hand you the Denver Water Quality Report. This is some reports that I work on with my political committees already. Unfortunately, you're just learning about this now. So in the Denver Water Report, it is 30 times the federal limit for radionuclides, 30 times. 1 part per billion, and there's 30. But it's not just for one type. So what I wish is, maybe I would have 3 minutes and like email you the Denver Water Report. It's a PDF, and I've been collecting them over the years, so I have them from 2005, the official reports. Frisco County in Denver.
We can talk after. I'll give you my card. We can talk.
Yeah, no, I'd like to email you.
Yeah, we'll talk, yeah, we'll play talk for after. Yeah.
Chris, I'll get with Mr. Greg Ginsburg.
And just want to know, yeah, this project is specific to PFAS and the question was specific to PFAS.
Yes,
Also, for one. Sorry.
I know you're getting there.
Kind of piece of information, so, you know, once we determined that we had PFAS in the well 7 water, we did talk with the state and communicated with the county because Bill's Ranch neighborhood is, you know, adjacent to, and they're in that same alluvium, and most of the houses there are on wells. So through the county, they had state funding, and they offered well testing for all the residents back there. I don't know exactly what those results are. I believe the county, you know, has it posted in their archive data, maybe on their website. But you know, one of the things that we were curious to see is a residential well oftentimes doesn't have to be quite as deep as a municipal well. You just have to, you know, get to the water where the water is and go a little bit further because you're not drawing kind of most of that water out. So some of the wells back there being shallow might not have been near that PFAS chemical plume that's underground right now. It kind of, you know, dynamically moves the water flow and whatnot. But the depths of the wells definitely have an impact on what it can reach.
Andy Aronson, just want to compliment you guys for staying ahead of this, you know. Yes, we found a problem in well 7 and then you shut it down, so no well 7 water is reaching my tap, so thank you for that and for everything you're doing to clean up the problem, so to speak.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Is it your intent to have public hearings at later point where if and when we got to a $5 to $25 increase in percent of water bills, that you're gonna explain this to the citizens of Frisco, or how is that gonna work? What is the timing of that?
Yeah, so it's kind of, you know, we have our water rate study that's probably going to happen, start around April. And with that, you know, I can get back to you more on dates. We don't have exact dates kind of determined on that, but we'll kind of use that to look at what future rates would be. And then there'll be some council meetings where we kind of look at options with council. And, you know, there's always option for public comment to come to the council meetings and comment.
And are all 3 of you the lead or the best person to speak with, or is there one person that we should communicate with?
So on the rates, it's more Ryan and myself. So yeah, either of us can answer questions.
And do you know when the state awards the grant funding? The deadline for this next?
They take about 8 weeks to review our application. So application is going in early January. They take about 8 weeks to review that. And at that point, we'll know what funding get.
So for clarity on that grant,
You know, we lived in a charmed, oh, I'm sorry.
Mark, it's like I didn't introduce myself earlier. Are you seeking with the grant total cost? Is that the grant amount?
So it probably would not be the total. And so this would be, you know, there's different options, whether it would be a low interest loan or forgivable loan that we're looking at. And, you know, likely the town would still be having funds being contributed to it as well. Not the full amount, but yeah, we'll know more here a little later this year.
Like I was saying, we live in a we're blessed to live here. Gosh, we're just so blessed. But boy, talk about something that affects property values, and that everybody should care about that too. Not that anybody's going to sell, but it affects taxes and everything else when values go up or down. And water is it's a big thing, So thank you for doing everything you can. It's like I said, it's just it's always been a hotbed. And I've been the mother that if the kids are in the shower for 5 minutes when they were young, I'm banging on that door saying, you're clean, you're wasting a resource, and I mean, water's just always been near and dear to me. So we're just here as really concerned people, not even as much of the finances, but just wanting good quality water.
Yeah, that's our priority too.
Yeah.
The systems that are in the other towns and regions or whatever, has there been any follow through on that? I mean, I don't know how long they've been in. It's been a couple of years to see how that is working out.
Follow through on.
If it's continuing to work as far as taking the PFAS out and all that.
Oh, are you talking about,
The other towns you mentioned?
I see, yeah, like, is that technology continuing to work?
Yes.
Yes, it is, because the media is frequently changed out. So it's not like something that you install once and then expect it to work forever.
Okay.
The media is being refreshed as needed. And like I said, the GAC and anion exchange technologies have been around for a very long time. We more recently are we can use this to treat PFAS as well. So they are still providing effective treatment after many years of installation.
And the life cycle of the filter media is determined by the concentration of the chemical compound you're removing and the amount of water that's passing through that filter bed to kind of do that active removal.
Yeah, do we have any questions from virtual folks? I think you'll need to unmute yourself. Okay, not hearing any questions from virtual people. Any additional in-person questions?
Thank you all for.
Yeah, thank you all for great questions. And again, if you can remember to sign in if you didn't already, we would appreciate that. And we can be available after.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Yeah, I got it.
How's it going?
What's your title?
Project manager.
Great job. I'm sorry.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Two different things. One, I was getting an ethics anyway, I don't want to. Because, it's a federal year system in some way, shape, or form. I think there's opportunity there. I'll keep that one in the back of my head.
Addressing it on the source.
Yeah, exactly. But then additionally, the Colorado River District, they are, so the last 2 years, they've been putting all of their community funding partnership dollars towards other communities that aren't on the Colorado Basin purchase. But coming in 2025, we've already started having discussions about those funds now being available to Colorado main stem communities. So just put that one in your back pocket. If you guys think that might be worth pursuing, I'm about to be appointed to the River District in January. So
Awesome.
you got a friend for me. I'm on myself, so I'm actually probably invincible. High school is disgusting, dirty people. But yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Nina Water. Yeah,
it's good to meet you. I've seen you.
Yeah. I'm one of the commissioners.
Previous articles from years past.
Yeah. Never thought that, water is probably the worst place.
Thank you.
But yeah, I was gonna tell one of your council members, but yeah, just keep that in your back pocket.
Awesome, no, that,
Um, I don't have a card on me because my backpack is out in the car. I'm gonna tell council member, oh, yeah, please. I'll also remind council member Aaron before I go. Because, yeah, I mean, 9 million, that's cheap, y'all. I was like, happy. Certified. You guys don't know how good of a deal you're getting, okay?
Westminster last week, and he said they're doing a water treatment plant that's 250 million.
Yeah. So I'm like dropping the bucket, truly. Great work, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, how do we end this meeting?
that.
Oh.